times a day I get the question from lots of people asking me, how can I knit this same thing using different yarn, different needles, thicker yarn, thinner yarn, whatever. The question they're really asking is, how do I knit this and change the gauge in a pattern? In this video, we're going to talk about when that works, when it doesn't, and how to do it when it does work. First, let's talk about when it works. If you are looking to change the gauge in a scarf pattern, you're good. You can really do whatever you want because a scarf can be this wide or really any width. It's still going to fit your neck. It's still going to stay warm. As long as you like the fabric you're creating, you're good. The only thing that might be different is you will use more yarn or less yarn because you've changed the gauge. So that's easy enough. The other time that it will work is if you're knitting something like this. This is my pattern, Barber Pole Cowl, and it's double-sided, and it has no shaping or anything to it. And if you wanted to change the gauge, you would still really want to stay with the same width because it's meant to be worn doubled over around the neck. And if it was too thick, it would kind of be too bulky, or if it was too thin, too narrow, it really wouldn't keep you warm, you know, in the neckline of your coat. So you kind of want to stay along the same lines, and we're going to talk about how to do that when it does work for something like this. Now, when it doesn't work is when you have knitting that has shaping to it, and that would be something as simple as a hat, because the hat is all, you know, you have a cast-on number, but then as you get to the crown, most hats will have shaping, and the decreases on the crown of a hat are worked not only to look good and line up with the pattern and however that is, but they're worked so that the relation of the stitch width to the stitch height is all going to work together to give gradual shaping so that the hat looks good when it's finished. And if you change the cast-on number, you have to change the way the decreases are done so that mathematically it works out and so that the shape looks nice. And that's not that hard of a thing to do if you want to test knit it and do that. But it's a lot to email a designer and ask them, how do I knit this sock weight hat using bulky yarn? Because really you do need a new pattern when it comes to that. And the hat is really the simplest example. The times where you really can't change gauge in a pattern would also be for like a sweater. Especially a sweater that's knit in pieces and seamed together. In a sweater like that, you have shaping around the armholes, shoulder shaping, neckline shaping, and if you change the gauge even by one stitch, the pattern, you can no longer use the pattern as it's written because things will change so dramatically. You really need to start from scratch writing a whole new pattern in the whole new gauge. And it seems like an easy enough question. I get why people ask me, if I want to knit this out of this yarn instead of the one you suggest, what's the cast-on number? And it seems like that would be enough. You have the cast-on number, you follow the rest of the pattern as written, and it would work. But with a shaped item like a sweater, a hat, socks, gloves, mittens, anything with increases or decreases, really an entire new pattern is necessary. Well, let's talk about when it does work and how you work out the math for that. Because this is math for knitters, right? In this little sample, I have these pins marked out to show how to check gauge. You mark off 1 inch and you count the number of stitches between. That's going to be an important thing when we move into these slides. Okay, the problem is you have a pattern that lists the gauge and the width of the item, the finished width when it's finished knitting it. You want to knit the same width with a different gauge, either more or fewer stitches per inch. First, you need the gauge as it's listed in the pattern, which should be right there in front of you, and the gauge that you want to use. Because you've knit a swatch, you've used the yarn and the needles that you want to use in the knit, and you know exactly how many stitches you're getting per inch. So let's say the gauge in the pattern is 5 stitches per inch. You've measured your gauge, and you are getting 7 stitches per inch. The finished scarf, for example, is 10 inches wide, and the cast-on number in the pattern is 50. So we have all this information coming together so we can get to our answer. Multiply the number of stitches you're getting per inch, which we came to 7, by the width that you want. And you want to match the width that the pattern gave you, which is 10 inches. So 7 stitches per inch by 10 inches is 70. Ta-da! Your cast on number is 70. And this method works whether your stitches per inch are more than the pattern states or fewer than the pattern. Couple things to keep in mind. If the item you're knitting has a stitch pattern, like a lace pattern or a cable pattern or anything else, your new cast on number must be a multiple of that stitch pattern. And that's where things can get complicated, especially if you're working in a lace or a cable pattern. If it's a simple mock rib with just a multiple of 2, that's easy, but it might require some more work to make it a multiple of the stitch pattern and keep things in pattern. The next thing, changing gauge will probably also change the number of yards or meters of yarn you need to knit the item. If you're knitting, you want to knit a 10-inch wide scarf, and you're going from something like a bulky yarn like this, and you want to change the gauge to, wow, all the way down to a sock yarn like this, you're going to need more of this yarn, more yards of this yarn to knit the same length. Just something to keep in mind. I hope this video helps, because I know I get this question so many times about changing gauge in a pattern.